Hello. Well, we're all familiar from reading the Gospels of the account of how Jesus hung around in taverns, which in today's world would be called, in Europe and America, which would be called bars and clubs, um, with prostitutes and basically low lives, right? So he's hanging about in dives, right, drinking establishments. And somehow Christians seem to think this is very, very laudable, that this man, his young man in his 30s, is hanging round with low lives, with people getting pissed generally, as people do, getting drunk, telling dirty jokes and, carousing and, in pubs and bars. And somehow this is very, very laudable that he is going there. This rabbi is going there to socialise. And I just want to question the belief that this is a very laudable, wonderful thing for a man of God, a rabbi, to be doing. The Christian is thinking, well, he's doing this in order to save souls, to bring people back to God. And I want to question whether this is a valid way of going about things. Anybody who's gone to bars and pubs, spending any time in bars and pubs is... People are there to drink generally, and when people drink, they become more incoherent, they become loud, they're not very good at listening, and they go on, and they're shouting, and, get very emotional because of the drink, and it gets a bit bawdy, and it's not really the place for serious conversation, although serious conversations can and do take place in bars and pubs. But often people are, there to get shickered, get a bit drunk, and it's a bit loud, it's a bit noisy and carousing. And, well, we know there's a time and a place for everything, right? You have to understand that the temple was in Jerusalem, the temple, and there were synagogues at the time of Jesus, just as there are now, and people know where to go if they want to consider godly things, or if they want to talk to a rabbi or anything. They go to the place, they go to the temple, they go to the place to meet with God. But Christians love the idea that God is going in bars, he's going in nightclubs, he's going in lap dancing clubs. Isn't this great? God is visiting lap dancing clubs in order to save souls. But you have to understand, at the time of Jesus, everybody knew there was a temple there. Everybody would have been brought up to know about the temple if they weren't living in Jerusalem, a synagogue, place of worship, going to pray 3 times a day. Everybody would have been brought up to this. Jewish people would have been brought up to know their religion and know what to do, right? There would have been community centres, there would have been probably maybe women, perhaps trying to help other women, perhaps women are perhaps leading lifestyles, perhaps a Jewish woman has perhaps gone off the rails a bit. But you see, within Jewish society then and now, I have to tell you, it would be the women helping the women. You wouldn't be the rabbi, I can tell you that for a fact. There would be no way that a rabbi would be going visiting any Jewish prostitute for any reason whatsoever. It just wouldn't be done. It wasn't done then, and it wouldn't be done now. If you have a problem with a Jewish female or somebody, she's taking drugs and things, the idea it's a woman to woman thing, which I think most of you will agree, is quite reasonable, and that's how things have always been in the Jewish community. When there's a female, when there's real problems like with a female, what tends to happen is the rabbi's wife, this is one of the roles of the rabbi's wife, that she would be trying to get in there to get to know the woman and, and see if she can perhaps persuade her maybe this is not quite the lifestyle for you, and, try and help her and things. So that is one of the roles of the rabbi's wife. She is very much, can often be the counsellor for other women, right, over women things, right. And this is why when a man is looking, he's a rabbi and he's looking for a wife, he's looking for the right sort of woman, because he knows that's part of being a rabbi's wife, is hospitality, inviting into the home, being able to get on with people, to reach people, to help people, perhaps, to bring them back to more, practicing Judaism and so on. And so what the Christian would call ministry is probably part of, in a sense, the term I would use perhaps for the rabbi's wife, it is quite a responsible position. And so if you have at the time of Jesus a woman working as a prostitute or anything like that, or sort of gone a bit off the rails, drinking too much and things, hanging round the taverns, really, in the daytime, it would be a woman that would be trying to reach her. It would perhaps be a woman high up somewhere in the synagogue, an older woman, maybe, a respected woman, a wise woman, and that would be the person who would be reaching out to that lady, not a rabbi, and certainly not Jesus. I am not surprised the Pharisees were disgusted and questioning about Jesus's behaviour, because let's be honest, stand back and be objective. What is this guy doing, hanging around drinking establishments when everybody's there and getting drunk and it's loud and it's bawdy? People are not in the frame of mind for serious conversation. Let's be perfectly honest. I've been in enough bars and clubs. That is not why people go to bars and taverns. Sometimes people like to have a heated political debate or something. They might be talking about, the Romans because it was occupied by Rome, and they'd be discussing things like that. But it would be rather loud. It'd be bawdy. It'd be, people have a few drinks and it gets a bit shouty, and people are not paying attention and listening to each other, but they're just shouting what they're thinking and arguing, and it gets all a bit. What is Jesus doing there? What is he doing there? That is not the place for him to be. But the Christians can't understand this because they don't understand how the society worked at that time, the Jewish society. Everybody would know the temple existed. Everybody would know there were synagogues, places of worship where you could go 3 times a day, where the rabbi is. They would all know where the rabbi's wife would be. Everybody in the community would know everybody, right? That's how it is in the Jewish community. It always has been and always will be. You do not have men going in, hanging about with the women. It's just not done. Now, the Christian likes the idea of God, in his son is going and mixing with a prostitute. Well, let me tell you something about God, is that God, I don't know a lot about God, but I don't think I cannot believe that God would send a virile young man of early 30s hanging about with a prostitute. And do you know why? Because God knows women. And you know women, and I know women, and that Jesus would be a challenge. All the ideas, no prostitute would try and come on to Jesus. He's so holy. And they just went to him for counselling over. No, get real. Get real. He's a man. He's a man. And if he's hanging around with prostitutes, don't you think there'd be some bets? I can bet him. I'll get him. Women like a challenge, and they like mischief. And there's nothing more challenging than a holy man who is unmarried and shouldn't be going to a prostitute and shouldn't be having, So I think many women, and I'm not saying all prostitutes would do this, but the Christian is naive if they think that not one prostitute would try and come on to Jesus. Not one prostitute would try and persuade him and to... he's supposed to be flesh and blood. What man can resist? What man can resist sex? What man can resist it? What man, apparently we're told he's resisting all temptation. Well, And maybe he can resist a piece of bread, if he's fasting. But that's a bit different to refusing to, sex. The appetite. Because if he's fully man, right, he's going to be able to get an erection. I'm telling you straight. And those prostitutes would know how to go about doing it very quickly and very subtly. And it's the most dangerous place for God to be sending anybody, any man, to be hanging around with a prostitute. And then surely if God is wanting to, has any concerns about a Jewish prostitute or a Jewish woman who's gone off the rails, sort of drinking too much, God, I would have thought, would have said, well, look for a woman, an older woman, a wise woman, a woman who's very understanding, who relates well, Well, he was going to send a woman to talk with a woman, because that's how the Jewish community operates. That's how the religion of Judaism operated then. It is not really the role of a rabbi to be spending time with a single woman. I lived in an ultra-Orthodox Jewish area, and I know this for a fact, is if a man, an Orthodox Jewish man, has to visit a woman, he, for any reason, like to collect the rent. So if he's collecting the rent from a house where there's a single woman or a woman living there, the door has to be kept open the whole time. In other words, she opens the front door, and if he goes through that front door has to be left open. And every door has to be left open. In other words, the reason why they do this, and this has always been the case, it would have been the case with Jesus, is you leave the door open in order to let the community know that you are visiting a woman and that anybody has the right to walk in to check that there's no hanky-panky going on. And this is what actually happens, and I know because it's happened to me, and I've lived in an Orthodox Jewish area, and this is what they do. Because so there can be no hanky-panky, right? One of the reasons why ultra-Orthodox Jewish men dress the way they do, one of the reasons is to deliberately stand out. Because in Eastern Europe, the idea was you must stand out, because if he's doing something that you shouldn't be doing, like going to a house of ill repute, if he's going to a brothel, if he's going to a prostitute, everybody will notice him going into to see the prostitute. And that is one of the reasons of the distinctive dress. It's about deliberately standing out. So if you do something wrong publicly, people will be able to identify. So if somebody sees you doing something wrong, they will quickly be able to identify. That is one of the reasons for the distinctive dress. It's got nothing to do with the colour. It doesn't matter if it's pink, blue, green, purple, or black. It's deliberately to stand out, particularly so that the community can locate that man and see if he's doing anything he shouldn't be doing. Because one of the great things, and one of the 10 Commandments, is don't commit adultery. That's one of the 10 Commandments. And one of the ways of monitoring or trying to implement do not commit adultery is to have men dressed, Jewish men, dressed distinctly, even if they're just wearing a yarmulke. So, look at that man's gone into the brothel, but he's wearing a yarmulke. It's a Jew. It's a Jew. He's going to a brothel, and he shouldn't be going to a brothel. So there is nothing laudable in Jesus hanging out with lowlifes. And you have to remember, if he's fully human and a young man, there is a lot of drinking. And you have to ask the question, what would his mother think? What would his parents think? What would Miriam and Joseph think? Would they be happy that their son, young man, unmarried, is hanging out in taverns? Right? I don't think they would, to be honest. What's he doing? You know, I think Jewish mother would be quite concerned. What's he doing drinking? He might develop a drinking problem. You would expect, so we're told from the Gospels, that Jesus was a very bright youngster. He was impressing the rabbis when he was a child. He was so clever, so smart, and all the rest of it. Surely Jesus, if he was so clever and so smart and so wise and everything else, surely in his spare time he wouldn't be going to taverns. He would be doing things like teaching bar mitzvah, preparing boys of 12 for bar mitzvah. That would be a more useful thing to do for the Jewish community. Right? Teaching Torah. Surely that's what you were doing. Surely that's what we'd be doing if he's a young man working as a carpenter. He shouldn't be hanging around in taverns in the evening. He should be giving to the Jewish community constructively, because apparently he's so learned and so wise. But this is where I think the Christian doesn't understand really what holiness is all about. They think they do. They think it's legitimate to be hanging out at a lap dancing club, for a Christian man to be hanging about in a lap dancing club in order to try and save souls. Now, Jesus said his answer to the Pharisees, which was what is such a wet answer? This is ridiculous answer he gives. So they challenge him on his behaviour. Do you know what Jesus said? It is not the well who need a doctor, it is the sick. Now, what a stupid answer that Jesus gave to the Pharisees. Now, I want to challenge that stupid answer of Jesus. It is stupid. It makes no sense. Have you ever seen a doctor running round nightclubs and bars and clubs looking for patients? Or do you need a doctor? Do you need a chiropodist? Doctors do not go round pubs and clubs and nightclubs and lap dancing clubs and so on looking for patients. They don't do that. Psychiatrists don't go round lap dancing clubs looking for patients. Psychologists don't do it. Dentists don't do it. Chiropodists don't do it. Have you ever heard any doctor going round bars and clubs looking for patients? Is there anybody sick in this bar? Is there anybody sick in this pub? This is stupid. What a stupid answer. If you're sick, you go to the doctor. Everybody knows in the Jewish community, if they have a physical illness, they know where to go. Those Jewish doctors, if they need a tooth pulling out, they go to the dentist who will pull the tooth out. If they have emotional problems, they will go to somebody in the community everybody will know, who will help with the emotional problems. If they have a spiritual problem, they will go to the synagogue, they will go to the temple. Everybody within Jewish society will know exactly what is available within the Jewish society to meet their needs. And the idea is, if you need a doctor, the patient goes to the doctor. The doctor doesn't go in round the nightclubs and pubs looking for patients. But the Christian seems to like the idea that the rabbis and the priests are supposed to go round pubs and clubs and nightclubs and all sorts to try and minister, inverted commas, and save souls and get people to try and lead godly lives. And that is stupid, because it doesn't happen. I've never been to a Jewish dance where you've got rabbis trying to bring Jewish young people more involved in Judaism. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. It just doesn't happen. In fact, the synagogue dances are held in the synagogue hall. So you have the shul, you have the synagogue, and attached to the synagogue will be a hall. And it would have been the same at the time of Jesus. There would have been a hall specifically for things like weddings, bar mitzvah celebrations, all of that. Different things going on. So people know where to go. And this is how the Jewish society worked at the time of Jesus. And it works, and it's always worked like that and continues to work like that. You do not have rabbis going to Jewish dances. You don't have Chabad. You don't have them going around Jewish dances trying to have serious spiritual conversations when people are going there to meet, get to try and find a nice Jewish girl or something, or to, socialise. There's a time and there's a place for everything in life. And this is a very banal answer. It's a very pathetic answer that Jesus gives. And why don't people challenge some of the things that Jesus says? Why don't people challenge him on this? Why don't they think about the things that he says and realise that he's actually mistaken and wrong in what he says? He is wrong in what he says. And the Pharisees are quite right to pull Jesus up and say, what are you doing? This is not the way for you to be behaving, as hanging round. This is really, we all know it's easy to get into bad ways of drinking. We all know this. Some people can develop drinking problems. And there will have been at the time of Jesus alcoholics. Just as there are now, there will be people going to those pubs and taverns every night or most nights of the week because they have a drinking problem. There will be prostitutes going there looking for customers. They're hanging out there for customers. There's arrangements in bars and taverns. The prostitute is there. They buy them a drink, and then the drink is more expensive, but they have the sex, and there's all sorts of arrangements with the bar. It's no different. It will have been no difference in biblical times than it is nowadays. There would have been arrangements for prostitutes at certain bars, taverns, to be there smiling at the customers, to draw in the customers, a pretty face, can I buy you a drink? To buy them the drink, and then they're offering, and the barman is quite happy, the landlord's quite happy to have that prostitute there, because the punters are coming in, buying the alcohol, and then she goes off he has this drink, and then she takes him back to her place for sex. That's how it works. This is how the real world works. And this is the world of Jesus. This is what he would be going into. And you have to say, what sort of Jewish boy does that? What sort of Jewish man is doing that? Because I find this very, very suspect. And I bet the Pharisees did, and that's why they questioned him. But the Christians are so gullible, they're so naive, they're not living in the real world, and they don't realise. They think he's just going to resist all this. They're just so gullible and naive. They're very nice people, but they're so naive. They're so naive about human nature. And they are just presuming that Jesus will just... Oh no, Jesus wouldn't have an erection. Jesus wouldn't be aroused when a woman would lean across and put her hands discreetly up his leg. That's the kind of thing women would be doing in the bar. Right? Jesus would be a challenge. Oh, yes, he would be a challenge. Let's bed Jesus. This holy preacher going round. I can bed him, because that's what women love to do. They love a challenge, particularly a Christian minister. And Christian ministers are easy. Most men are easy. It's easy I was an evangelical Christian for 42 years, and the amount of Christian men, they're easy. They're easy. They're easy. If a woman wants to get a Christian man into bed, there's no problem. They're easy. They don't think they are, but they're very, very easy. Most men are easy. If a woman sets her mind on getting a man into bed, it's easy. And I knew when I was much, much younger, I could get any man I wanted into bed, because most men are up for it with anybody. Quite honestly, you'd be surprised. I've had pastors and that coming on to me. They're up for it. They've got beautiful wives, they've got a new baby, but they're still up for it. And you put them in there in that bar. You put them in the lap dancing club, you know, with some gorgeous, pretty, hot young thing, and you honestly think they're going to resist it? Come on, get real. No. And do you think God is going to agree with these men going into these places? You know, the God of Israel, I think, will be saying, don't go there, because this is just like, this is too risky. You have a wife and children at home. You should be hanging out at these places because you think you're so strong and I can't be tempted. And God knows you can be tempted, because this is what these prostitutes excel at. They are good at selling their wares. It's their job. It's how they earn the money. They know how to tempt a man. They know how to persuade a man. And, you know, we've got to really be honest about this. And are you saying that Jesus would not be aroused by, he's in this bar and he's got this woman and she's discreetly putting her hands up, right, and teasing him and flirting with him, which is what, well, any woman would be loving to do that with a man like Jesus, wouldn't they? I can bet him. I bet she has one or two of them might have a bet with a friend now. I'll bet him. They wouldn't want him. They wouldn't even need him to pay her. She'd do it for the laugh. I'm telling you, plenty of women. And you know, I wouldn't be surprised if the Pharisees would try and set Jesus up with a woman just to try and discredit him. That's another thing, because politics and religion can get very dirty, and if they're wanting to tarnish Jesus because they don't like him or think he's a troublemaker, it's not inconceivable they could set him up with a woman, because that's how he's going to fall. Because all men fall by women. It's a fact. We all know this politically and religiously. Men, when it comes to women and sex, are just stupid. The balls that rule the head. The balls ruled the head. And here you are honestly telling me that Jesus was no different, because he's fully man. He's fully man. He's fully human. You see. But the Christians don't like to hear this. But if he's fully man, he's going to be sexually aroused if a woman is going to start doing that and give him that. And is he being able, but Jesus would be able to resist. Well, you know. Bit odd. But then I would say, maybe he can resist. Maybe I'm all wrong. Maybe he can resist. What Jewish mother would be happy with him hanging out like that? And how is Jesus going to find a wife? Because as a single man, the Jewish community would be concerned that he finds a wife, right? Because within the culture, men get married. And how is he going to meet a nice Jewish girl if he's hanging around with prostitutes and lowlives and taverns and that? What sort of guy is this guy? And would I date him? I wouldn't. I'm a nice Jewish girl. I'm not going to date Jesus. What's he doing hanging around with those prostitutes? And I wouldn't date him. Would you? What nice Jewish girl is going to be interested in Jesus if he's hanging around with prostitutes? And the parents and the family would forbid it. So you're not going to hang around with that. Did you know he's hanging around with that prostitute? So. Do you know what she's doing? And he's hanging around with her. Why is he hanging around with her? He's supposed to be a man of God. He's supposed to be so religious, so orthodox. What kind of Jew? What kind of orthodox Jew is hanging around with a prostitute? It's just not done. It is not done. It is not done within Judaism. It never has been done. If a woman needs to be reached in order to try and get her to bleed, you know, a more respectable life, then it's going to be the rabbi's wife, it's going to be some woman in the community who's respected, who's trying to reach out to her. But it's certainly no man, it's certainly no rabbi, and it's certainly no man of 30. I am telling you that. And, are you so but the Christians are so naive and gullible. They're all like groupies following Jesus. That is so un-Jewish. I can't tell you how un-Jewish that is. Like he's like some sort of rock star. It's horrible. It's perverse. It's sick. It's horrible. The idea of these women hanging about with this so-called Orthodox Jew. It's very cultish. It's like, yuck. It's like horrible. It's the anathema of all in Judaism that is a respectable way to behave. To have women following you like that and doting on you, prostitutes. And do you ever hear of a rabbi having prostitutes and things and women chasing them and all over them like groupies and like he's some sort of rock god or rock star? I mean, it's just not done. It's not the way, the Jewish way. It's not the way of the Jewish religion. It never has been, and it never was, and never will be. It is just not the way of the Jewish religion. And from what I've seen of Christian men, they're very weak, and they'd be very easy to bed, and it's as I say, it is ridiculous that anybody who is sick in any way, who's in a pub, in a bar, in a tavern, in a nightclub, in a lap dancing club, they go to the doctor, they go to the dentist, they go to the rabbi, the rabbi does not go to the lap dancing club, the rabbi does not go to the coke dealers. This is not, this is where, but the Christians love it. They love it. They think this is what God should be doing. But it's quite clear, you're looking at the Jewish religion, no. God doesn't come down to our level. God wants us to become up to our level. Right? He sends the appropriate people where we are to perhaps try and persuade us to leave the cesspit, to lead a more respectable life. But he's going to be very careful who he sends. He's not going to send a rabbi into a lap dancing club to try and develop relationships with the lap dancers, to try and persuade them. No, don't do this. You're a nice Jewish girl. Try and give up the lap dancing. No, if he's going to send anybody, if God was going to send anybody, he'd send the rabbi's wife. Right? Whether the Jewish lap dancer will be interested in talking to the lap dancers, Jewish rabbi's wife, but I can't really see them doing that. I can't really see him doing that. Because the way the Jewish community functions is that everybody within the community knows where everybody is, and there is a kind of respect that if that's the way you choose to lead your life, that's your business. I can remember, I'm most embarrassed to admit this, but I lived in an ultra-Orthodox community, and I remember sunbathing topless. I'm not proud of this. In my garden, my front garden, topless. Nobody complained. Now, when you think about it, I was living in an ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, sunbathing topless, and nobody, not even the rabbi's wife, had a quiet word with me or tried to persuade me, would you mind, please, this is, I'd appreciate it, there are men here and my husband, and I would appreciate it if you just could perhaps put on the top, because, it would not have been unreasonable for the rabbi's wife, she only lived 2 doors away from me, to ask me to cover myself up, but she didn't. Now, this is interesting, because they knew I was Jewish. She knew I was there in the front garden topless, but she didn't come over and interfere. She didn't say, would you please mind covering up because there's men round here. And it is extraordinary that she didn't. But, I lived there for many years, and I think there was a kind of thing, well, if that's the way you want to lead your life, then so be it. But they were continuing to lead their godly lives, their ultra-Orthodox lives. I mean, at the corner of my little place where I lived, there was a shul, a from shul, and, you know, but I was still doing the sunbathing topless. And nobody complained, nobody put a letter in the front door, there was no outcry, nothing. So in fact, the Jewish community actually responded by ignoring it, by saying, well, she's an adult, this is the way she chooses to behave, she's Jewish. But they didn't try and convert me or to try and persuade me to come back to be more modest as a Jew. They said, well, if that's the way you want to lead your life, that's your business. And perhaps this is the way Judaism has probably managed to survive in the diaspora, is that it doesn't impose itself on people. It's like, well, if that's what you want to do and you're Jewish, well, so be it. But we're here, and you can come to us if ever you decide you want to stop doing that. Right? So in the end, I did stop sunbathing topless and realised I shouldn't be doing it. I was very, very sort of repentant and ashamed and embarrassed about what I'd done. It was awful. But they didn't. And perhaps this is a success of the Jewish community in the way it conducts itself in the diaspora outside of Israel. It's not imposing itself on the non-Jew. It's not saying you must behave like this. It's not imposing itself on even Jews that are not Orthodox. It's not saying you must do what we're doing. It's setting an example, and it's saying you obviously doing what you want to do, but we're here. You can see the lives we're leading, and if you ever want to join us, you're welcome. But they're not imposing it on it, and I think that's why we are successful in the diaspora, whereas a Christian is trying to convert everybody to their way. And this is where you get the conflict. And this is why you get the wars, because it's the Christians, historically, that incite war. They are the inciters. It's the Christians that come against Satan, right? They are the one who incite. They're constantly coming against people and trying to force and persuade and to impose their faith on everybody else. I remember sitting on a bus and as an evangelical Christian and seeing a little banner saying that they'd obviously paid the bus people to put up, but it said Jesus is, you must repent and you must believe in Jesus, or something like that. And I suddenly realised this is quite threatening, because if you're not a Christian, if you are of another religion or no religion, it's quite intimidating, and quite the language that was using, repent or die, things like that. You used to see men walking about with placards at the front and back, repent or die. You will never get Jewish people behaving like that. You will never get any form of Judaism where they're going round in that sort of manner, imposing their belief system on other Jews and other non-Jews. But the Christian does, and so they antagonise people, and they always think they're right and they're imposing. And the people in the bars and the taverns at the time of Jesus would know if they need spiritual help, if they need anything. The community is there. The doctor's there, the rabbi's wife, it's all there. And it's close by, it's nearby. I was sunbathing topless in the garden, and the rabbi's wife was 2 doors away from me, right? I could, right? But she chose not. She obviously might have even thought about it, but she decided the wisest course was not to confront me about my behaviour. Now, the Christian would say perhaps she should have done. It's debatable. But the way that the community does this, from what of my observation, is the Jewish community doesn't impose itself or say you must be doing this to other fellow Jews. It kind of gently just suggests, but it's not so in your face like the Christians. And I think that's why it's more successful, and it doesn't antagonize people, it doesn't annoy people. And one of the reasons Christians are so often disliked is because they always taking the moral high ground. They always think they are superior. Well, they do think they're superior to other people. They think they're better than other people. They think they're more moral than other people. They think they're more ethical than other people. And it's this superior attitude. Um, and There's a lot to be said by setting an example simply by the way you lead your life, so that those around can see you. Because the people that have most influenced me have been people that have just lived their life quietly without preaching, but setting me a good example. Just by the life you lead and your conduct, the way you speak to people, the way you behave, the way you dress, you're setting an example by the very life you lead. And those around you in the community are noticing, and they might be comparing you with them and thinking, actually, I should perhaps be dressing a bit more respectfully. Or perhaps really I am perhaps exposing too much flesh, and maybe I should be dressing more modestly. Or perhaps this lady never swears and she's much more ladylike, whereas I'm just swearing like a trooper. So for me, just a good example is enough to challenge my own behaviour. But getting back to the words of Jesus, to justify him being in a bar all the time with prostitutes and lowlives who are just talking rubbish, drinking, is just ridiculous. A ridiculous explanation to give to the Pharisees. And I agree with the Pharisees. And I would understand the Pharisees would probably say, don't mix with that Jesus. Stay away from him because he's a bad example. Would you want your children, your teenage children, mixing with Jesus, who is out with prostitutes and lowlives at pubs, bars and taverns all the time? You'd be worried about your young people. I don't want my teenage son starting drinking or hanging about with prostitutes. If he starts mixing with this Jesus, where there's prostitutes, it's going to be you worry about your son. You'll be led astray. And this is one of the things that comes over in the Hebrew scriptures of being careful not to be led astray. And the prostitute is symbolic of, as a symbol of leading Israel astray. The woman, the prostitute on the highway, leading the married man astray. And that is symbolic of Israel, the Jewish people, straying from God, straying from leading a godly life. It's like you've been enticed by the prostitute standing there at the doorway. Hello. Hi, Mr. Cohen, would you like to come in for some refreshments? And Mr. Cohen's thinking, oh, she's nice. And he's led astray and he's married. And God uses the prostitute as a symbol, right, of the woman who is trying to lead men astray, who is trying to take even the single man who shouldn't be going with a prostitute, who should be waiting till he meets the nice Jewish girl and get married, and it's all done properly, you see. And so, but you see, this is where Christianity perverts the prostitute. Because in the Hebrew Bible, the prostitute is a symbol of being led astray. What mother or father wants their son or daughter going to a prostitute? Whether they're single or married. They don't want that. They don't want that. Do you want your husband going to a prostitute? Would you want your wife going to a male prostitute? You know, we all would say, well, no. And I hope this has been thought-provoking. and has helped you to perhaps think through things that you've never thought about before. And I thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me.